Vamos a comenzar otra vez. Juanes. This one. Okay.
But if you can leave that in the in there and put it close to you.
Yeah, okay, all right, we'll do that.
Yeah, lower it.
Mil gracias por venir. Yo aprecio mucho que han venido y compartir con nosotros estos momentos tan importantes. Thank you all for being here. I am so grateful and also grateful to our presenters. Our next presenter is going to be Levi Romero. Be sure to turn off your cell phones. That's my sister. Okay. Levi Romero is an American poet, academic, architect, and associate professor emeritus in the Chicana and Chicano Studies Department at the University of New Mexico. His work focuses on community engagement, cultural studies, and oral history documentation. He was named the inaugural New Mexico State Poet Laureate in 2020 and the New Mexico Centennial Poet in 2012. Romero is a bilingual poet whose language is immersed in the regional Manito dialect of northern New Mexico. His work has been published throughout the United States, Mexico, Egypt, Spain, and Cuba. He has co-directed 2 films on Acequia culture, Bendición del Agua, a short film, premiered at the National Cowboy Poetry Gathering in Elko, Nevada, and Going Home Homeless won a People's Choice Award at the Taos Shorts Film Festival. His oral history research and documentation project, Following the Manito Trail, has been presented and exhibited at various cultural museums throughout the Southwest. His most recent books are the co-edited anthologies New Mexico Poetry Anthology 2023 and Querencia, Reflections on the New Mexico Homeland. His 2 collections of poetry are A Poetry of Remembrance, New and Rejected Works, and In the Gathering of Silence. He is co-author of Sagrado, a photopoetics across the Chicano homeland. His poems, book publications, and articles have received numerous awards. His most recent article, La Nueva Resolana, with photos by Don Usner, was published in the fall of 2025 issue of New Mexico Magazine, and his co-authored article with Jose Rivero and Enrique Lamadrid, Los Molinitos de la Gente, was published in El Palacio. Let's welcome Levi Romero.
We're all set to go. A poetry of remembrance. It may be the sky, its evening color, just north on the horizon lifting in whispers of apricot, lavender, and periwinkle. Or it may be the way the old rusted car's rooftops smudge into the sullen landscapes, drifting light, cartwheeling across the alfalfa field towards a full moon incoming. I am sure it is that this evening, which makes it difficult for us to gather our bags and continue on, even though we have garnished what we can, and like a grandmother's measure, take with us no more and no less. Here, aquí, en este pueblo, en este valle, en esta vecindad, it is a poetry of remembrance and of an honoring of land and people. Earth songs, love poems, born of celebration and mourning. In the place where I come from, también de gusto se llora, como de tristeza se canta. And under that colorful backdrop of a spring dusk framing the village, there are sad stories that bind us in our coming. There are joyful stories that accompany us in our leaving. At times we see a finality to a way of life no longer, but we carry in our hearts a memory time the ancianos speak of, through the poetry and the song and the rhythm of their stories. And we take their stories and we form ours to theirs, and we lament the tongue, recalling the sound of its native language, how we carry it with us into this, our other world. Lamenting the spirit of the heart, which will cry out to no one's hearing. And we take the forewarning of the elders, our grampitos, our gramitas, tios y tías, and we'll remember, we will remember. And we'll laugh and join in the circle of our brethren in that vast periphery, hollow and echoing, remembering us back home, because we are still the ones, still here, still alive. And we'll rejoice and feast in the clumsiness of our faith, and we'll dance around the open fire, stepping out into the next tomorrow, because we're the ones still here, still alive. Or maybe it's simply the thump of the trunk lid as it is shut, the one more final goodbye having been said, the family dog gone, wagging its way back under the old retired family sedan, Venus already twinkling. It may be that, esta tarde, a poetry of remembrance and of an honoring of land and people, earth songs, love poems, of celebration and mourning, which makes it possible for us to gather ourselves and continue on. Santas y buenas tardes desde Dios. As you all know, we just say simply buenas tardes or buenos días or buenas noches now. We leave out the buenas tardes desde Dios, no? The old traditional greeting, the blessed greeting. And I once greeted a señora, an anciana, with buenas tardes. And she looked at me and she said, ¿Cómo que buenas tardes? Si buenas tardes dice el diablo, por no mentar a Dios. And so I make sure now to add the rest of that greeting, because that is our tradition here. What I'm going to be presenting is a poetic and narrative cruise through el Valle de San Antonio del Embudo. Probably a lot of people didn't even know that Dixon's original name was el Puesto de San Antonio del Embudo, right? The concepts of querencia, pláticas, manito cultural identity, and other norteño no Mexicano concepts will inform my presentation. This version of today's presentation, because I do this presentation, but I kind of change it around depending on the occasion or the audience. Agradecimientos, primero gracias to Sylvia for coordinating this event in celebration of el aniversario de 300 años del Puesto de San Antonio del Embudo. Thank you, Sylvia. A lot of work to put something like this together. Thank you also to the Embudo Valley Library folks for helping to host today's presentations. Thank you also to Yolanda Romero Jaramillo and David Lady, who did an amazing job last weekend of hosting the 300th anniversary of Acequias in the Embudo Valley. That was an amazing event too as well, and thanks to them. And aprecio a Enrique Lamadrid y Don Usner for sharing of their words and images today. Beautiful images. My article, as was mentioned in the introduction, La Nueva Venezolana, was recently published in New Mexico Magazine with photos by Don Usner, and I don't know if some of you have seen it, but it's a really beautiful article with photos of Fisher and Clovis sitting out in front of the tiendita. You all know who Clovis and Fisher are, right?
Oh, no.
Okay. And they're the real storytellers and historians of this community. And then the Los Molinitos de la Gente that I co-authored with Enrique and Jose Rivera just came out in Palacio. Really beautiful article too as well. If I do say so myself. I incorporate poems into the essay that I'm going to be presenting. The essay, the full essay is in this book, Querencia, Reflections of the New Mexico Homeland. And the poems come from different collections of my poetry, a poetry of remembrance, new and rejected works. And the other book that was mentioned is Sagrado, photo essay and poetry book. So, con eso seguimos adelante. Ya hacimos una dedicación a Cipriano y un momento de silencio, which was really beautiful. I had planned on doing that already before you suggested it, Sylvia, so thank you for doing that. So I want to dedicate the presentation to this guy that I grew up with here in Dixon, because a while ago we were all wearing shades, right? Remember that? And this guy used to wear shades at night. He actually had prescription glasses, but he didn't have the photo gray, they just stayed dark all the time. And that vato was so cool that nobody ever made a joke about it. And his name was Donald Sanchez, hijo de Mauricio, right? And so I'm going to dedicate it to him, because he was so cool he could actually wear shades at night, Enrique. Are you that cool? A poetic and narrative cruise through el Valle de San Antonio del Embudo. The story of human existence is one of movement and settlement, and people have pondered how these ways of being in the world influence who we are and who we might become for millennia. Our origin stories the world over feature accounts of where a people came from as a way of telling how they came to be. Northern New Mexico cultural envoy Juan Esteban Arellano used the traditional Northern New Mexico concept of querencia to define the relationship between place and identity. Querencia, Esteban wrote, is that which gives us a sense of place, that which anchors us to the land, that which makes us a unique people. Although I grew up hearing the term querencia, it had no particular relevance for me beyond what I understood querencia to be, the place where one is born and raised. And that's how Leveo Martinez explained it to me, en donde naciste y donde te criates. For many people, the meaning of querencia might express aspects of nurturing and belonging, but actually lack a connection to the ideals of family and community. Querencia, as Esteban wrote, is a place where one feels safe, a place from which one's strength of character is drawn, where one feels at home. And it startles me when I encounter people who have no sense of querencia, no sense of home, no memory of what is by way of what was. Do I hear Manu Anastasio's mighty mystic drawl? Coming over brain waves fuzzy as AM radio nights long, long time ago. When we slept outdoors in the humming summer, drinking from quart bottles of soda pops and sharing bags of chili chips, and strumming broom guitars to Band on the Run, with our transistor radios tuned in to X-Rock 80 or Oklahoma. Seventh grade crushes and teasing howls in the mooing cow dusk and hopping toad yards lit in gold and orange. Adobe dust on my brow and burning, yearning, learning love, exploding from my heart like bottle rockets on the starry spangled 4th of July. Where are you laying, little dipper dreamers who once stirred under grandma's homemade blankets in the dewy breath of early morn? When grandfathers with shovels slung across their shoulders headed for the ditch banks to open up their gates. Oh, July apple, suckling summer with the wisdom's tears trickling down your pink mountain slopes. I see you, I feel you, I hear you, I hear you dying to be born again. Oh, fathers' graves with splintered crosses swaying under a November moon, whose resurrection burneth through the flaming hearts of your displaced sons. And from snowflake-whiskered men mumbling broken mouth, forgotten ancient prayer of dust and bone. En la plaza where rainbow haloed angels crowned with a wreath of wild country flowers blow their groggy horns. I hear you, yes, I hear you, Mano Anastasio. I hear you calling like a lone crow in the pines. For me, Querencia is not only personal, but also communal and deeply connected to the people and the place where I was raised. Mi gente, aquí, mi pueblito. My Querencia is more than a cornucopia of memories or cultural artifacts. It has a geographical imprint with stories etched across the landscape, rising from the depths of archaeological remains and making its way out of the everyday platicas like Fisher and Clovis have at the village Tiendita, or at the post office, around the kitchen table, in La Resolana, and in those sacred spaces wherever two or more are gathered in the name of community, como esta tarde aquí, no? One evening, my cousin and I were sitting on the bridge of one of the village's lower roads, reflecting on many of the changes that have occurred since his family relocated to Albuquerque in the mid-1960s. It seemed that every person that went by was a non-native resident. And I turned to him and I said, Primo, what do you think about all the changes that have happened to this town since you left? And he said to me, they can change it all they want. Pero aquí en mi corazón, nunca lo van a cambiar. And no matter how many years, how far removed, or how long the distance from the road once traveled, but it is, still is, because we were, at times, cruisers cruising through the heartland. So no matter how much things change, that which gave us life, sustained us, will always be with us. Here, as my primo reminded me, aquí en el corazón. Take a little trip. Take a little trip, Don. Take a little trip with me. You all remember that line from that one cool song? Carmela remembers it. No, Carmela? What song is that?
What song is that? Take a little trip. I should know.
You should know. One last cruise, Taos Plaza. This morning I decided to throw one more cruise through the plaza. En memoria de Primo Bill y de los resolaneros de aquellos tiempos. Those men who had found their circle come together in the presence of each other. Like everything else around here, it seems all has become memory. Some Saturday mornings, my father would make the 20-mile trip into town. We park at the Cantu Furniture parking lot that sits atop the old 7-Eleven building off Paseo del Pueblo Sur. It was exciting for me then as a small boy to know that our car was moving across the roof of the store below. And now I still find it amusing. How did that sort of engineering feat arrive in Taos? And then if you stop to think about Taos Pueblo, right, with its multi-story buildings, that's nothing. And that Pueblo has been there for cuantos años, no? Since time immemorial. Anyways, the other evening, I pulled into that same parking lot and for a brief moment contemplated leaving my truck there, but for the sign that read, customer parking only, all others total with. I didn't want to get that ticket like you, Donna. This morning, as I cruised into the plaza, I saw one lone, recognizable living remnant figure standing in faded jeans, white t-shirt, Converse canvas all-stars and a bundle of newspapers strapped around his shoulder. It was El Poli, flat top, square jawed, and looking 30 years ago still the same. Pero where were you, Primo Bill? The park benches deserted, the covered portales no longer bursting with children clinging to their mother's shopping stride. Mama strolling elegant, black hair curled, red lipstick, the purse and coat. Was it that Jackie Kennedy period or was it Connie Francis? I look out at the parque, los callejoncitos, las sombritas, pero nada, nada, nada. No se mira nada. ¿Qué pasó con la palomilla? Con los indios envueltos en sus fresadas? And as Juanito Herrera used to say, ¿qué pasó con la minifalda? I reach for the radio knob and I crank up Santana. I let the sound of the timbeles slap against the vacant hollowness of memory, against the plaza's deserted facade, against the songbird's mournful eulogy. I notice a group of tourists congregating next to where the old army surplus used to be. I look, don't look, I look again. They don't see me, or maybe they just pretend not to. But I know I'm on trial. I always feel like I'm on trial. I let off the gas pedal and cruise in slowly. I lean back into the seat, comfortable and controlling the steering wheel with one finger. Here's one for the old times. Dale vuelo. I remember cruising through the plaza as a teenager with the Luna brothers, Pedro and Rupert. I remember Rupert, badass Califa loco, coming out to spend time with his grandparents whenever he and his brother were wanted by the law back in Madera. I remember him leaning far back into the seat of that black 67 Chevy, sporting stick-shine palcos with one leg up on the dashboard and fingers snapping time to war tunes on the 8-track stereo. His locura, cocky and loud, estilo California, nothing like Nuevos, quiet and proud. Back then, Tausí wasn't a low-riding town. Chale, Lointales came from España, or maybe Chimayo. But I remember Rupert blurting out the window to some Tauseño dudes staring us down. And he looked at them and he said, "What you looking at?" I said, "We're just low-riding, man." It was kind of a scary scene for me, but for them it was like just being cool, no? Just like wearing shades at night. Well, I remember those times being mostly like that. The predictable unknown, lurking, waiting around like some badass dude leaning back with one bent leg up against the wall, and somehow we'd slid through each incident, acting like it hadn't mattered whether we would or not. This morning, the people hanging out by the coffee shop laughed and languaged, their carefree tourist manner void of history, of memory, neither attachment nor sentiment to time and place. No scars as enduring testaments to the questions posed, the answers given. A young woman stretches out against the oncoming morning. Muchacha, what am I thinking? I'm the writing instructor of this summer's poetry class. I can't think and act and look that way, you know. But at the stoplight, a young vato, long hair and a ponytail, looks at me. He catches the riff. He knows la movida. A tight smile forms across his mouth. Oye, ¿cómo va mi ritmo? Banco punta, mi ritmo. Oye, ¿cómo va? For you, carnal, con la greña larga, one last cruise around the plaza. And the crosses etched on boulders across the landscape remind us of who we are. Genizaros, mestizos, vecinos to the native peoples, who together fought and died opposing American occupations in battles and skirmishes like La Batalla del Embudo on January 29, 1847. The geographical distance to Mexico and the cultural, social, and political disjunctions from Spain and Western culture help the Nuevo Mexicano del Norte de Más Allá create a stronger bond with the landscape and with his nativo vecinos. The spiritual reverence for the earth, Nuestra Madre Tierra, is a shared regard, though the ritual and ceremony might differ between the native peoples and their mestizo neighbors. Nos consideramos indio hispano, not because it's a trendy thing to do, but because it is la sangre de indio que corre en las venas. Our Indian blood that runs in our veins that cannot be denied us. The indio hispano may not have been raised in the Indian way, but his heart beats with the rhythms of his ancestral past. May the earth, wind, clouds, snow, rain, all plants, animals, las estrellas, el sol, el cielo, Nuestra Señora, la Virgen María, and the spirit of our antepasados be a blessing on us as we journey forward. Tus santos y tus velas, ¿qué me salvarán? Sin la cruz no hay gloria. Pero como dice mi hermano Juan, todos quieren la gloria, pero nadie quiere la cruz. Indigenous mother encased in the dead dust of permanence. How fast the world goes us by, shadowy and flapping, like the clothes of the line in the backyard off a back road in Ranchos. The sky darkening along the edge of the mountain, autumn storm clouds approaching slowly, as if set and framed within a landscape interpretation of an oil or pastel. To what direction should I cast out my prayers? The sun comes up still to the east, but my life is disoriented. My feet are fast and swift, but with no direction, no intent other than in the getting there. I feel like the Indian dancer in the painting whose headdress and plumes are frozen and whose gaze has been blushed out by a well-applied brushstroke. It is in the what is not there that one can sometimes find what is. On this day, en este día, el día de la Asunción de Nuestra Señora, I watched footage of last summer's parade on the local TV station. Watched the young Fiesta Queen, white-gloved and crowned, waving her hand, flicking her wrist in perfect motion, to the crowd along the procession as they do in events in places like Macy's or Pasadena. And the young caballeros in their stout horses trail behind, yelling through perfect teeth, que viva la fiesta, dressed as conquistadores, wearing their new-grown beards and the latest style of sunglasses. And I thought of the Pueblo down the road and what its people must feel for this reenactment. And I am everything at that point and nothing. For I feel joyous and celebratory, for we have endured. My people, mi gente, mi raza, los manitos, la huerfandad, the orphaned ones, whom Spain abandoned, Mexico did not adopt, and the U.S. never wanted. And I feel the sorrow of the Indio because of that endured. And my heart, if it could be captured, painted, and displayed, exhibited in the finest galleries where the locals do not enter, would be earthen, grayed, and splintered, a tinge of red perhaps, colors of the wooden crosses, tilting in their final balance in the camposancos amongst the ruins of those first iglesias destroyed in the Pueblo revolt of that not so long ago. In Gabriel Garcia Marquez's novel, 100 Years of Solitude, you may remember that José Arcadio Buendía argues with his wife about his desire to move from their hometown of Macondo. José wishes to leave, but Ursula insists on staying. There is nothing to keep us here, José pleads. A person does not belong to a place until there is someone dead under the ground. When I visit or drive by the various camposantos around the Embudo Valley, I contemplate the people whose names are scripted on the crosses and headstones. Many belong to friends and relatives who I knew intimately well. The warm cackle of their laughter, the heavy paleness of their sorrow, even their favorite songs. Other names belong to people I never met, but knew them through the stories I've heard, relaying their idiosyncrasies, adventurous spirits, gifts and talents, kindness and generosity. If an account of a deceased person leans towards a negative portrayal, it is done with respect. No ill is spoken of the dead. Que en paz descansen. May they rest in peace. It is a form of conduct we should learn to apply to the living as well. For as I always say, no one is truly dead until their name is no longer spoken or remembered. Because it goes on in that way. I remember that day on FM Hill. We were just hanging out, drinking beer. There was really nothing that special about that day, other than they just don't happen like that anymore. There were a few of us there, but I can't remember exactly who, but I do remember that Mage was there. Flat top, white hair, Korean War veteran with faded tattoos and a crazy laugh. And he was crouching low to the ground. He took a good hit from some homegrown, raised his can up to the sky, and then blew the smoke into his beer can. And then he took a really good swallow. I remember that because I thought maybe it was like some sort of special magic trick going towards infinity. Because I knew Mage had come down a long road and carried with him secrets of an unspoken trade. I remember him today. Beyond the skyline of this town, the noise of crows and the increasing traffic, and I tip my can in remembrance to the gray skies and the black volcanoes and to Mage, because it goes on in that way, remembering. It goes on in that way. When I was younger, I yearned to see the world. But now that I have more opportunities to travel than ever before, I look forward most to the times when I can go back to my grandmother Anita's house where she raised my sister and I during our summer breaks from school. Although the house was vacant for a good number of years after she passed away, whenever I walked into the house, each room had a distinct smell that defies description. I have never smelled anything else like it. It was not quite lavender, jasmine, rose, old wood, moist earth, or the geraniums growing in a coffee can on the window shelf. It smelled like no other place on earth. It smelled like Grandma's house. It smelled like home. In the evenings, we would sit out on the porch while she played harmonica and told stories. We would sit on the low-set windowsills or along the porch, transfixed, hearing Mama Ana tell of a not-so-long-ago way of life. Sometimes we gathered around the wood stove, hearing her recall the Fiesta de Santa Rosa that converged in late August with out-of-town guests who came annually for the feast day celebrations and to reacquaint themselves with parentela, family, friends, and vecinos. The people's homes were filled with good cheer and lively commotion as their visitors buckboard sat parked under the orchard trees through the several days of the town's festivities. Can you imagine that, what that might have looked like? Can you hear it? The braying sounds of free slams and goats could be heard across the village. And the salas were filled with music and dancing. Wood stove of my childhood where papitas sliced like triangle chips were fried in manteca de marrano. Wood stove of lazy autumn smoke swirling away to nowhere. Wood stove of December evacuating the cold chill at sunrise. Wood stove of celebration and mourning of post-World War II Korea in Vietnam. Wood stove corner that kept vigil over drunken nodding remembrance. Wood stove corner where tios, primos, y compadres gathered on visits from Khalifa. Wood stove corner with a warm ear for nostalgia, where Mama Ana stirred the atole and wrung her hands thumb over thumb, praying for her children's children's children. Wood stove that witnessed 6 decades washing its face at the bandeja, that saw Western swing dancing and dim lantern flame, that watched Elvis come in from across the llano, strumming a mail-order Stella and singing in Spanish. Wood stove of the feast lamb tied up under the crab apple tree, of early sour cherries ripening above the cornstalk horizon, of neighbors bartering a cup of sugar in exchange for mitote and conversation. Wood stove of rain tenderly pouring into the afternoon and salt sprinkling onto the patio from the mouth of the porch. Wood stove of the nighttime crackling softly, of harmonious harmonica medleys blowing before bedtime prayer. Wood stove facing John F. Kennedy's picture on the wall. Wood stove of Protestant Sundays ringing without bells. Wood stove of dark earth, fat worms, and acequias. Wood stove of 1960s propaganda and rich hippies knocking poorly at the screen door. Wood stove of private, crazy laughter. Of woodpeckers pecking through the rough-hewn barn timbers only to meet the sky. Of rabbits nervously nibbling evening away in the arroyo. Of the water bucket banging and splashing all the way home. Wood stove of the water drop sizzle, of buñuelos and bizcochitos and flour on the chin, of choke cherry jam oozing out from the end of a tortilla. Wood stove that heard Mentorcito's violin bringing in the new year, that saw Tio Eliseo bring in an armload of wood, that heard Tio Antonio coming down the veredita, whistling a corrido and swinging his cane. Wood stove of the blessed noontime and Grandma Juanita heating up the caldito. Wood stove of the sanctified and untamed Holy Spirit, of the dream-awake dreamers prophesizing in the beginning how the end would come, of creaking trochil gates left open forever, of twisted caved-in gallineros rocking in weeping April wind, of abandoned orchards waist deep in desanimo, of teardrops that held back the laughter, of the penitente procession moving through the hills for the soul of the village, of pitchforks and axes under Grandma's bed in case of intruders, of coffee cans filled with everything but coffee, of 10 cents for a cream soda at Corina's, of strawberry knee-highs in a bag of chili chips at Medina's, of a handful of bubble gum a los sneaky acá Santos. Wood stove of genius wisdom dressed up as the village idiot, of hand-me-down stories locked away in the dispensa, of bien loco totote heroes cracking home runs Saturday afternoons aquí en La Cañada. Wood stove of all that and more of all that disappearing as children played hide and seek in that abandoned good time feeling while stumbling on the footsteps of tradition. Wood stove that heard the fall of a people rising in silence, that died in nursing homes of a loneliness without cure, that cured themselves in the company of the so many more lonely. Wood stove of my childhood. ¿Cómo está el tiempo, Silvia? Yeah? I'm going to cut it a little bit here because I'm feeling good about it. I don't know. To leave or not to leave one's querencia is the ultimate dilemma. El que se va suspirando, y el que se queda llorando. Sometimes the conflict between staying or leaving gives birth to an equal regret. When I was still quite young, I saw the phrase "sal si puedes" brushed on the wall of a dilapidated building in a neighboring town. For many people, moving away was not an option of choice, because as they used to say around here, Payuta Califa will army. After someone would graduate from high school, the question was, ¿Qué vas a hacer ahora? What you gonna do now? And the reply was, pues, Payuta Califa o el army. They actually might have been meaning Laramie. Because there was a lot of manitos that wound up in Wyoming, so it sounded like Laramie, but it might have been Laramie. The pursuit of employment, education, and enlistment in the military, or a desire for a better quality of life, were some of the most common reasons people left their village. As time went on, people's desire to leave was replaced by a yearning to stay. Quédate si puedes. That's what became the overriding cultural mantra. Quédate si puedes. No matter where I find myself, the arrow of my internal compass always points towards my ancestral home, where my cultural and spiritual point of reference originates. My strengths and weaknesses, my biggest insecurities, and strongest self-assurances were shaped and formed here. Really, across the street at the elementary school over there. That's what gave me my strength, and that's what gave me all my complexes. I suffer from both still to this day. Essentially, all that shaped my worldview. El dique is my querencia, and I have the physical and emotional bruises and scars that prove it. I run into people sometimes that say they're from Dixon, and that's what I say to them. Show me the bruises and the scars. My wife thought that was crazy. A ver tus scars. A ver tus bruises. No, I shouldn't pick on my camaradas over here, but if you're from Chibayo, you got bruises and scars. If you're from wherever you're from, you got bruises and scars. I got Dixon bruises and scars. Where a person is raised can tell a lot about who they are. Dime donde te criates y te diré quién eres. As was stated earlier, origin stories the world over feature accounts of where a people came from as a way of how they came to be. Who I am, like a tightly woven trenza, is braided to the landscape. The people, the culture, the history, the memories, the stories, the place where I was raised. San Antonio del Embudo, el dique, mi querencia. Gracias. If it's all right with you, sería para este país?
Yeah.
All right, because I think this is something that I've recently started doing. And I think it's a really wonderful idea to take pictures of the audience. So everybody smile now. Una, dos, tres. Muy bien, gracias. Gracias.